the architecture of justice, corruption, citizenship, and the social contract. I always say that civilization is a bit like a Jenga tower built by toddlers. Everyone insists they know what they're doing, but the whole thing is held together by delusion, duct tape, and the hope that the kid with the juice box doesn't sneeze too hard. It is a miracle it stands at all, really. But here's the truth I keep coming back to as I audit this world with my streetwise philosopher eyes, staring down the barrel of history like a detective who's seen too many crime scenes and not enough convictions. The tension between the governed and the governing is the oldest drama in the human experience. It is older than Rome, older than Egypt, older than those bizarre Sumerians who popped out of nowhere in the historical record like they were NPCs that just spawned on a glitchy map with the cheat codes enabled. This relationship is the fragile architecture upon which all human flourishing depends, and when that architecture cracks, it doesn't matter if you have marble columns, Senate chambers, or sleek glass skyscrapers reaching into the clouds like fingers trying to scratch the face of God. The rot spreads, the ceilings sag, the foundation groans under the weight of a million broken promises, and the average person ends up paying the bill for damage they didn't cause. I look at governments the way a seasoned investigator walks into a cold case. Before the forensics team arrives, before the politicians hold their press conferences, before the bureaucrats release official statements written in such sterile language that even embalmed corpses would find them boring, I'm looking at the micro-expressions of the state. I'm looking at the contradictions, the layout of the room, the blood spatter of public policy that went sideways. I'm looking for what doesn't add up. And let me tell you something, brother, what usually doesn't add up is the idea that the form of government matters more than the character of the people running it. We obsess over the shape of the container, ignoring that the liquid inside has turned to poison. Plato already solved this in the Republic. He drew diagrams, used metaphors, practically begged humanity to pay attention to the soul of the regime rather than the title on the door, and we, in our infinite wisdom, stuck our fingers in our ears and said, but can't democracy just fix itself like a Roomba if we leave it running long enough? Government forms are costumes. They are theatrical wardrobe. Democracy, monarchy, republic, oligarchy, technocracy, they're just outfits the state tries on like it's playing dress up in the wardrobe department of a Netflix political drama. But when corruption enters the bloodstream, the costume becomes irrelevant. A corrupt democracy is like watching The Godfather if Michael Corleone decided to run for city council. Technically it has elections, technically there are voting booths, but the guy controlling the ballot boxes is also the guy who controls the concrete shoes, and the only thing being counted is the cash flow. Meanwhile, a corrupt dictatorship is just the same thing without the performance art. They don't even bother with the nice dinner and the handshake. They skip straight to, do what I say or I'll introduce you to the basement. But from the perspective of the guy on the street, the guy trying to feed his kids, pay his rent, and keep his sanity intact, the boot on the neck feels exactly the same whether it's wearing a royal crest, a communist star, or a campaign sticker from a liberal democracy. The pressure per square inch is identical. Corruption is the universal solvent. It dissolves structure, intention, institutional purpose, and the very soul of governance. It takes the carefully carved separation of powers, that beautiful, delicate clockwork designed by geniuses to keep tyrants in check, and turns it into one big bureaucratic gumbo, stirred by lobbyists who smell like expensive cologne and moral bankruptcy. It turns democracy into a corporate parade float where the waving candidates are just animatronic figures programmed by donors. It turns monarchy into a kleptocratic wet bar where the aristocracy treats the national treasury like a personal piggy bank. It turns republics into the world's most complicated Ponzi schemes. Every system, when infected by the virus of self-interest over public service, becomes, in effect, a kleptocracy with better branding. It's theft with a marketing department. It's a cartel that prints its own money and writes its own laws. And oh, how the branding gets people. Humans love branding. We are addicted to the aesthetics of authority. We will defend a logo harder than we defend our own dignity. Give a building marble pillars, an eagle, and a motto in Latin that nobody can translate, and suddenly the public treats it like it's the holy temple of truth. We walk past these buildings and lower our voices, as if the stone itself commands respect. Meanwhile, behind those pillars, some intern named Chad is shredding evidence of illegal stock manipulation while his boss is on a yacht explaining to a regulator why water is actually dry. That's the absurdity Carlin always pointed to. People don't want truth, they want the illusion of stability. They want the aesthetic of justice, Lady Justice with her blindfold, her perfectly chiseled jawline, and her scales so beautifully balanced they could be used as background props in a Zack Snyder movie. But aesthetics don't feed the hungry, and marble columns don't protect the innocent when the judges are for sale. We have confused the map for the territory, and the statue for the god. But when I think about justice, not the Hollywood version, not the civics textbook version, but the real, beating heart version, I see something that comes with a burden. Justice is not entertainment. It is not a spectator sport. Justice is duty. Justice is responsibility. Justice is sacrifice. Justice is the moment in Gladiator when Maximus looks at a corrupt emperor and decides he's done kneeling, not because he wants power, but because the universe demands balance. Justice isn't the sword he carries, it's the conviction behind it. It's Bushido, Stoicism, and Kantian duty all bound together like a philosophical tri-force that glows in the dark. It is the refusal to accept that might makes right. It is the stubborn, irrational, beautiful insistence that there is a standard higher than the king's mood or the mob's anger. A just government operates with the humility of a monk and the discipline of a Roman legionnaire. It views power as on loan, not owned. It sees its authority as something borrowed from the living and held in trust for the unborn. That is why real justice demands impartiality. True rule of law is not rule by law. Rule by law is what tyrants do. They write laws like a magician writes illusions, creating statutes that criminalize existence for their enemies while legalizing theft for their friends. For my friends, everything; for my enemies, the law. That is the motto of the corrupt state. But rule of law, the real deal, is what the righteous do. They apply the laws even when the outcome is inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient, because justice without equality is just organized bullying with official letterhead. A just government knows it has two sacred roles: to shield liberty and to secure dignity. Freedom without safety is chaos, safety without freedom is prison. The balanced state is the one that protects speech even when the speech offends, and protects the hungry even when feeding them is politically inconvenient. A government that guards your right to speak but doesn't guard your right to survive is like a lifeguard who compliments your swimming technique while you drown. But let's go deeper. Let's talk about the mechanism of the soul of the state. You see, the state is a fractal of the individual. If the individual is greedy, the state is rapacious. If the individual is fearful, the state is paranoid. A just government is the collective manifestation of the higher self. It is the part of us that wants to build cathedrals, cure diseases, and explore the stars, rather than the part of us that wants to hoard gold and hit our neighbor with a rock. A just government acts as the prefrontal cortex of society, inhibiting the lizard brain, planning for the future, and regulating the impulses of the body politic. It doesn't suppress the people, it channels their energy. It builds the aqueducts, it paves the roads, it creates the neutral space where commerce and art can happen without fear of predation. It is the gardener, not the owner, of the vineyard. But here's the twist in this narrative, the part the founding fathers understood but modern citizens often forget because they're too busy distracted by the circus of the 24-hour news cycle. A just government is not enough. Because justice is a two-way street, and most people walk it like they're texting while crossing traffic. Citizens have responsibilities, too. Not the empty, performative ones like throwing flags on trucks or ranting on social media like a drunken poet screaming at the moon, but the deep responsibilities. The adult responsibilities. The ones that make you the grown-up in the room even when the actual grown-ups are acting like toddlers fighting over a toy. The just citizen doesn't just obey laws, they critique them. They question the state with the same rigor Plato used when interrogating the sophists. They don't outsource their conscience to political parties, corporate media, or influencers who have the moral depth of a kiddie pool. A just citizen studies the architecture of power the way a samurai studies the battlefield. They read history not to feel superior but to avoid repeating it. They step into the arena of public discourse not to win arguments but to elevate truth. They understand that the price of liberty isn't just eternal vigilance, it's eternal participation. It's the willingness to be uncomfortable. It's the willingness to lose a friend over a principle, or lose a profit over a moral line in the sand. You see, the passive citizen is the fertile soil in which tyranny grows. The tyrant doesn't need your active support, he just needs your apathy. He needs you to say, "I'm not into politics," or, "It doesn't affect me." That apathy is the vacuum, and power abhors a vacuum. The just citizen fills that space. The just citizen is the immune system of the body politic. When a pathogen enters, a corrupt law, a bribed official, a violation of rights, the just citizen swarms it. Not with violence, but with light. with exposure, with the relentless application of truth. They are the antibodies of liberty. And without them, the body dies. It's that simple. You cannot have a healthy body with a compromised immune system, and you cannot have a just state with a passive citizenry. We have to talk about the just citizen in the context of the modern world, where distraction is the primary weapon of the oppressor. It used to be that tyrants controlled you by withholding information. Now, they control you by flooding you with so much garbage information that you can't find the truth with a flashlight and a map. The just citizen in the digital age is a curator. They have to have a mental firewall. They have to be able to look at a headline designed to trigger their dopamine and cortisol and say, no, I am not eating that. They have to be able to separate the signal from the noise. Because if you are reacting to every manufactured outrage, you are not a citizen, you are a puppet. You are a node in a network you don't control. The just citizen disconnects from the matrix of outrage and reconnects to the matrix of reality. They look at their local school board, their city council, their own street. They start the work of justice where their feet touch the ground. And then there's the social contract, the invisible parchment humanity keeps rewriting but never signs. This contract is older than Hammurabi, older than the Roman 12 tables, older than Moses walking down the mountain holding 2 stone tablets like a man who's just been given the worst homework assignment in history. The contract is the fundamental operating system of human interaction. It explains why we aren't eating each other right now. It explains why I can walk down the street without wearing full plate armor. The contract is simple. I give up certain freedoms, the freedom to exact personal vengeance, the freedom to seize whatever I can carry, the freedom to live like a wild animal in the state of nature, in exchange for protection. The government gains authority in exchange for service. It's like a partnership between a knight and his lord, a Jedi and the Republic, a passenger and the pilot. It only works when both sides honor the deal. Think about the state of nature for a second. Hobbes called it solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. It's a battle royale. It's a server with no admins and friendly fire turned on. In that state, you might be free to do whatever you want, but you are also free to be murdered for your shoes. So we trade that chaotic, absolute freedom for civil liberty. We say to the state, okay, I won't kill the guy who stole my chicken. I'll let the court handle it. But in exchange, you better actually have a court, and it better actually work. That's the deal. That is the sacred transaction. But the social contract goes deeper than just police and courts. It's economic, too. We pay taxes, which, let's be honest, is just a polite word for the state taking a piece of your labor, and in exchange, we expect the Commonwealth. We expect roads that don't wreck our cars. We expect schools that actually teach. We expect water that doesn't light on fire. When the state takes the money but doesn't deliver the goods, that's not taxation, that's tribute. That's a protection racket. The just government understands that tax revenue is holy money, it represents the sweat and time of its people. To squander it on corruption or vanity projects is a sacrilege against the contract. And let's not forget the unwritten part of the contract. The social norms, the civility, the idea that we are all in this together. When a government divides its people, when it pits race against race, class against class, religion against religion, it is shredding the social contract. It is burning the village to roast a pig. A just government acts as a unifying force, reminding us of our shared destiny. A corrupt government acts as a wedge, driving us apart so we are too busy fighting each other to notice who is looting the treasury. But when either side breaks the contract, the whole architecture collapses. If citizens break it en masse, you get anarchy. You get the breakdown of social trust. You get looting, rioting, the law of the strong. It's Mad Max without the cool music, just dust and desperation. But if the government breaks it, that's the nightmare scenario. If the government breaks it, you get tyranny, Orwell with extra paperwork and digital surveillance. You get a state that uses the tools of protection to inflict predation. When the government breaches the contract, it's not just a policy failure, it's a metaphysical betrayal. It is the father devouring the son. It is the shepherd eating the sheep. When the state, which holds the monopoly on violence, turns that violence inward, whether through kinetic force or economic strangulation, it creates a trauma that lasts for generations. You see it in the eyes of people in failed states, a look of permanent exhaustion, a cynicism so deep it hits the marrow. They know the game is rigged, but they have to play it anyway because the alternative is starvation. That is the ultimate sin of a corrupt government. It forces good people to become corrupt just to survive. It forces the honest man to lie on his taxes because the tax rate is predatory. It forces the generous woman to hoard food because the supply chain is broken. It forces the peaceful citizen to arm themselves because the police are the criminals. It corrupts the soul of the nation by making virtue a survival disadvantage. A government that breaks the contract loses legitimacy. And legitimacy isn't a law, it's a feeling. It's a collective psychic state. It's the mandate of heaven. Once trust dies, everything dies with it: investment, innovation, civic participation, and hope itself. The nation becomes a zombie, walking, stumbling, decaying, incapable of either life or death, just limping toward collapse. And the citizens, those who walk the narrow path, are forced to become shepherds in a world full of wolves dressed as consultants. This truth is as biblical as it is philosophical. The prophets warned kings about their arrogance, the Stoics warned emperors about their pride, Kant warned society about moral shortcuts, Bushido warned warriors about dishonor, and the Norse sagas warned chieftains about betrayal. Even conspiracy writers in the modern age, yes, Ich, Mars, Farrell, Sitchin, Dice, all of them, tell different versions of the same story. When power goes unchecked, corruption blooms, and the people pay the price. They are mapping the shadows on the cave wall, trying to warn us that the puppeteers are getting restless. They are pointing at the cracks in the dam while the engineers are claiming the water levels are fine. And what happens during the breach? What happens when the contract snaps? Locke says we have a right to revolution. Jefferson says we have a duty to alter or abolish. But let's be real about what that looks like. It's not a glorious movie montage. It's messy. It's dangerous. It's a reset button that usually deletes a lot of good files along with the bad ones. That is why the goal of the just citizen is to prevent the breach. To fix the roof before the storm comes. To audit the books before the bankruptcy. To hold the line before the retreat becomes a rout. We have to understand that the unwritten nature of the social contract is what makes it so terrifying. It's not stored in the National Archives. It's not on a blockchain. It's stored in the collective mind. It relies on a shared hallucination that the rules matter. When a leader blatantly ignores the rules and suffers no consequences, the hallucination flickers. The screen glitches. The people look at each other and realize, wait a minute, there are no rules. And that is the moment the beast enters the room. That is the moment civilization reverts to the law of the jungle, but with nuclear weapons and high-frequency trading algorithms. That is the moment the thin blue line, and the thin red line, and the thin legal line all dissolve into the abyss. So, what is the remedy? What is the antidote to this entropy? It is the narrow path. It is the refusal to participate in the lie. It is the courage to be the friction in the machine. A just citizen is the sand in the gears of tyranny. It requires a willingness to stand in the gap, to be the guardrail that keeps the narrow path intact. It requires truth, even when truth is heavy. It requires accountability, even when accountability is uncomfortable. It requires the humility to admit that power is dangerous even when wielded by the well-intentioned. It requires us to look at the government not as a parent, not as a god, but as a utility, like the electric company. We need it to work, we pay for it, but if it starts burning down our house, we don't pray to it, we shut off the breaker and fix the wiring. This requires a new kind of civic stoicism. It means controlling what you can control, your own integrity, your own community, your own mind, and letting that radiate outward. It means building parallel structures of trust when the official ones fail. It means being a node of justice in a network of corruption. If the courts are corrupt, you be fair in your business dealings. If the media is lying, you speak the truth to your neighbor. If the politicians are stealing, you give to the poor. You become the counter signal. You become the anchor in the storm. You become the evidence that the social contract still exists, even if it only exists within the radius of your own life. When I survey the landscape of nations, those thriving, those crumbling, those pretending to be one while secretly being the other, I don't see wealth or military power as the difference. I see the status of the contract. I see whether trust still breathes. I see whether justice still has a pulse. And I know, deep in my bones, that civilization lives or dies on whether we choose the narrow path or the wide path. Whether we choose duty or ease. Whether we choose truth or illusion. Whether we choose to be citizens or merely subjects. The social contract is the difference between a world where life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, and a world where life can be communal, prosperous, dignified, and enduring. The architecture is fragile, but it is ours. And every generation must decide whether to maintain it, rebuild it, or let it fall. The choice isn't made in the voting booth alone, it's made in the mirror, every single morning. It is made when you decide to return the shopping cart. It is made when you decide to report the error in your favor. It is made when you decide to speak up in the meeting when everyone else is silent. That is the bricks and mortar of the social contract. That is the architecture of justice. And it is built by hand, one act of integrity at a time, by the just citizen who refuses to let the light go out. We are the architects now. The old blueprints are fading. The ink is running. But the principles are etched in the bedrock of reality. Justice, equity, liberty, duty. These are not just words, they are the laws of physics applied to the human soul. You cannot cheat gravity, and you cannot cheat the social contract forever. Eventually, the bill comes due. Eventually, the house built on sand collapses. So we build on rock. We build on truth. And we hold the line, not because it is easy, but because it is the only way to live without becoming part of the rot. Zerga, in synthesis with the philosophers,